let's talk running. What are my lessons learned as someone who was running only maybe a handful, 2, 3, max 5 miles in any given week, now going up to 100 plus mile months, not weeks, but in a month, so that's 20 to 30 miles every single week. What are my lessons learned from fueling strategies to races, heart rate training, and everything in between? So let's dive into it in this episode. This is the Garage Gym Athlete Podcast, and we're here to build autonomous athletes and put phenomenal programming into every garage, basement, and spare bedroom out there. I'm Jerred Moon, and I'm with Joe Courtney. We are strength and conditioning coaches who have turned over 20,000 people into garage gym athletes over the last decade. And we're here to reduce the information overload that exists in the health and fitness industry today. We're going to do that by covering relevant science and give actionable takeaways, not only from the data, but from our years of experience. So let's dive in. All right, today, I didn't want to come at you with science. It's more lessons learned on picking up running more seriously than I ever have in my fitness history, 2+ decades of training very consistently. I want to talk about running, what my thoughts were, or what my thoughts are on the sport of running. And if you're looking to get into this, just some things that you can think of for progressions, fueling, programming, all that kind of stuff. And so I want to get through, what ultimately is 6 different lessons learned I have. So let's dive right in. The first one I learned about running, and this is just smart training in general, is work up to the volume. And that should go without saying in any fitness program. You need to work up to the volume. And I rarely listen to that rule. In all honesty, if I'm starting a training program, I just consider myself advanced. I always want to start at the top. And with running, I just knew that was not going to be the case. I knew if I just went straight into 30-mile weeks, I was going to get crushed. And I know that in the running world, people are doing 100-mile weeks. So the volume I'm putting in is not even crazy compared to what normal runners do. But I knew even getting up to the volume that I wanted to, 20, 30-mile weeks, it was going to be hard on my body. So I started very, very slow, talking like 1 mile, 2 mile, 3 mile. And I would do this like lower volume for a week at a time before I would add a little bit more. So definitely work up to any run volume. I think it gives your body more time to recover and helps you accumulate the volume and get more accustomed to, what it's like to be on your feet for that long. See how your knees, ankles adjust, hips, everything else, and see how you're doing. So that's the first lesson learned. Work up to it. Don't be stupid. Don't jump into big, high volume training plans. In fact, maybe don't even follow a plan at all for your first 1 to 2 months of running. Just try to get some running volume in here, a mile there, a mile, 2 miles there, and do that 2-3 days a week, and just do that for about 2 months. No plan, no structure. Don't worry about heart rate training. And then after you have that broken in, go from there to coach, program, whatever it is that you want to do. Now, the second one is know what to do with heart rate training. If you have a coach, they'll probably help you out with this to some degree. And I have consulted with a coach several times now, and also just knowing what I know as being a coach myself about heart rate training outside of endurance and what I can infer through endurance in my own training. You really have to know what you're doing with heart rate training. And so what my progression looked like now that I've been doing this for, let's call it 6 or 7 months, is I started the slow accumulation of volume, and my training was pretty standard week to week, as I was doing 2 zone 2 runs, 1 speed work day. And that's just, I left that on repeat for a while. And then I got into a higher volume training plan, which kind of eliminated that speed work day and was going all zone 2. And this was math zone 2. And what I realized, and probably was spinning my wheels for about 2 months, was the whole idea, the whole premise behind adding in a bunch of zone 2 training is that you will optimize your aerobic base. You're trying to widen your aerobic base so the top end of your training can be higher, like a higher VO2 max training, better at intervals, all those kind of things. But you have to still do the higher heart rate stuff. So those 2 months where I was doing a lot of zone 2 training 3 days a week, some of the runs 2 hours, 45 minutes, at a time, all zone 2. I was getting a lot of volume, a lot of mileage, but that probably stopped being beneficial 3 to 4 weeks in, and I kept going with it when I really should have added back that speed element, higher heart rate training with some lactate threshold, heart rate in mind, going to top end VO2 max intervals. So just know that there's a lot of talk about zone 2, and it's absolutely great for building your aerobic base, but you also need to play in all these other areas. Even zone 3, which is like people call the junk miles zone, or they think that it's not very helpful. I'm now learning that there is a time and place for that. It's just not what you want to be doing all the time. And what my structure is looking like right now and for the next foreseeable block of training is now I have a hard day, and the hard day is typically zone 4 intervals, something like that, or a longer run at really high heart rate, which are very difficult, like kind of VO2 max runs. Then I have a medium pace day where this could be in zone 3, but still longer duration, and then one day dedicated to zone 2, because I don't really need to build any more zone 2. So you can overdo it on the zone 2 training. I think that's what I did, and it slowed my progress. So just know what you're doing with heart rate training. Know that you can mix it up quite a bit, and there is a limitation to zone 2. But if you're finding that, here are the earmarks that you can look for if you're trying to program or do this on your own. If you're doing a lot of zone 2 training and your zone 2 training is not getting any better, like you cap out at whatever it is, like a 10-minute mile pace, 12-minute mile pace, everybody's going to be different. 8-minute mile pace, a lot of people can do crazy things. But if you start to cap out and it's just not improving for a couple weeks and you keep doing all this zone 2 running, that's an indicator, hey, you need to probably start adding in more top-end stuff. And then if you're not doing as much zone 2, you're doing primarily top-end things, it goes in reverse. If you're not getting any faster in your repeats or your mile time or whatever, then it's time to probably add more zone 2 to widen that base. So they both kind of work in conjunction with one another, and one is an indicator to the other. So that's how you can know if you're looking to do this stuff on your own. The third one, this is like my own takeaway right now, but I don't know if I love running. I don't know if running is the best form of conditioning out there. That's my takeaway, my lessons learned right now. And I don't want to offend any runners, all right? So I'm putting in a lot of mileage right now, and I will continue to do so until my race is over in April. But right now, I don't feel as athletic as I normally do, and I don't feel as capable as I normally do. And I put that in regard, this is just a feeling. I'm doing a lot of running, and that definitely takes a toll on your body. I think there's a recovery element to that. But I also play a lot of sports, like with my kids, either run around, football, soccer, those kind of things. And I just don't feel as athletic. I don't feel as agile. I don't feel as quick. I don't feel as fast. Like I feel like I can run all day right now. They're definitely different forms of training, right? Like sprint training versus long endurance training. And it has me thinking a lot about the future, because what I've been doing is putting my toe in the water of the endurance world, see if it's something I would enjoy. I think I would really enjoy the mental aspect of pushing myself and breaking through mental barriers, those kind of things. But right now I'm not in love with the training. Like I said, I feel like I'm taking steps backwards in my athleticism, which I don't love. And I don't know if that will change. I'm also in a higher volume block. Might take me a while to adjust to the volume, and maybe things will get back to normal. I'll keep everyone updated, but just not a huge fan of how running's making me feel as an athlete, someone I've been training for a very long time, and I've been very happy with my athletic performance, my body composition, everything. And the only thing that I feel like is not great right now is, I don't feel as springy, I don't feel as quick, I don't feel as agile, I don't feel as athletic, and I'm not in love with that feeling right now. I'm going to keep trucking, I'm going to keep doing it, but just a lesson learned, like you might head down that direction too if you decide to take on more endurance. And there are other ways to train and get plenty good at conditioning and have great body composition and still be very fit. And that's what I've been doing for over a decade at Garage Gym Athlete with the Hard to Kill track and everything. There are ways to stay really fit and athletic and agile and feel great and not have to put in a ton of miles. Just something to think about. The fourth thing is fueling. And you probably see some of this in the content of the Garage Gym Athlete podcast as I jump around and talk about these kind of things. But at first, when I started going down the path of the endurance world, I was probably over fueling for me. And I've talked about this, like I said, in recent podcasts, getting carbohydrates before, during, after, all that kind of stuff. But then my blood work just indicated that that wasn't a good thing for me. And I've talked to some coaches and consulted with people about this, and everyone's definitely going to be different. So you have to find out what that threshold is for you. But zone 2 training doesn't really require any fuel. And other than like electrolytes and water, you're not going to need to slam carbs before and during zone 2 runs. Like, it's just unnecessary. You can get plenty of fat oxidation in the process of just running and doing zone 2 work. When you get higher demand, higher output, like higher heart rate stuff, VO2 max work, that's where you're probably going to want to add in some carbohydrates. Again, you don't need anything special. I'm talking like bananas and just making sure you're fueled to fuel out a few hours beforehand or the night before, depending on when it's coming up. So I'm just learning how to fuel really well, and you don't need as many carbohydrates as some endurance athletes would lead you to believe. And that's just my experience so far. I've tried it both ways. I've tried a ton of carbs, felt like crap. I've tried lower carbohydrate, and that seems to be better for me right now. I feel a lot better when I'm either training fasted with zone 2 runs or having just what would be like minimal necessary carbohydrates pre-run for the higher intensity stuff, and not slamming like a ton of carbohydrates. And again, that might be very specific to me, but I would say lesson learned for other people listening: play around with your own fueling strategies and really pay attention to how you feel, and don't just listen to someone else. Don't listen to me and say, yeah, you can do this on like low carb and only fuel when necessary, all that. Don't listen to me. Just maybe try it though. And then don't listen to the person who's saying you need a ton of new carbohydrates and you need to take a gel every 30 minutes and all that kind of stuff. Try both of them, but don't think that one person is right or wrong. There is no right or wrong when it comes to nutrition and your performance. The only thing that's right in nutrition and performance for the individual is what works for the individual. So you will have to experiment on your own in the endurance world and find out what works for you. It's taken me a while, but I'm really finding out what works for me, and it is not heavy, high carbohydrates. It's just not what it is for me. And so you might find that you're in the same situation. I recommend getting blood work, looking at your A1C, blood glucose, things like that, just paying attention to those things before you start a training program, during, after, and see how things are looking. Pay attention to how you feel, how your energy levels are, all of these indicators around things that have to do with your carbohydrate consumption, and then make a call from there. The fifth one, my fifth lesson learned, is set a race date. So I set that race in April. I'm running the Death by 5K in Memphis, Tennessee in April. And I have that on the calendar and I'm signed up. And it's good that I am, because if I go back to lesson learned number 3, with my mind's playing some tricks on me right now, I don't feel very athletic. I feel slower. I don't necessarily feel weaker right now, but I'm just not feeling how I normally do with putting in all this run volume. And so if I had no race and I was just running for fun, I probably would be quitting around now, in all honesty. If there was no reason for me to be running, I'm not training for anything, I was just running. And I'm not saying I would stop exercising. I would just revert back to what I was doing, which is just primarily garage gym athlete training on the hard to kill track. And I'd be like, that's what I'm doing. I'm not doing anything else. And so I probably am at that point now where I would be like, I don't know if this running thing is for me. But since I have the race date, I'm going to see this all the way through. I'm going to end up with a full year of endurance training under my belt. I'm going to see what it's like. I'm going to stick it out. And it's because I have that race date on the calendar and I want to commit. I want to do well there. I've made it very clear I don't just want to survive. I'm not trying to compete with anybody else. I'm just trying to compete with myself. I want to do well and see what it's like to actually perform in a race and not just survive a distance and be proud of myself for the survival of a distance. I want to try and perform. And so I'm training to be able to do that. So I have that big purpose. Like, I want to figure this out. I want to push myself. I want to go do these things, see what I'm capable of in the endurance world, all that kind of stuff. But if I didn't have any of that, which a lot of people don't sign up for races. They don't sign up for things. You don't have that like commitment level. You might quit. And in all honesty, the race only cost me like $100 something. It'd be very easy to quit something and be like, whatever, it cost me $100. I don't want to do this for 6 more months of training. But that's not what it's about. It's you're committing to this bigger, like, I want to find out what happens when I really train for a specific thing like this and do well in that being my goal. So I'm going to keep after it. I'm going to keep going. So I recommend you having a big why and signing up for a race and putting that on the calendar, telling other people about it. That way you don't want to back out. You'll stick with the training and you'll really see it through. Because at the end of the day, if I don't ever want to run again after this race, if I'm like, okay, that was cool, but dude, don't want to run, I will have learned so much in the process. I will have learned so much about fueling, endurance, heart rate training, pushing myself. So many lessons learned are coming out of this that I think are phenomenal. And I think it'd be very similar for you. I don't care what it is, but I always recommend people put something on the calendar. So it can be an ultra, it can be a 5K, it could be a Spartan race, it can be CrossFit competition, whatever it is for you, something that's going to hold your feet to the fire and force you to stick to a training program. Now, the last thing is time commitment. This is another reason why I don't know if I would stick with endurance training past what I'm doing now. I'm very accustomed to training 5-6 days a week on average for years on end and always doing about an hour a day. Some of my runs are, I mentioned earlier, 2 hours, 2 hours and 15 minutes. I have one scheduled 3 weeks from now that's going to be 3 hours and 15 minutes, something like that. It's like a zone 2 run. And this is just insanity to me, right? To put this much time into training with all the other things that I have going on. Like, I'm an entrepreneur. My kids this weekend, if I just counted it up, we have 7 sports games between Saturday and Sunday, or 8, something like that, in 2 days because my kids are in so many sports. And that's like a self-inflicted wound and not a complaint. But all these other areas is where I'm more interested in putting in lots of time with my family. Absolutely. I want to do that all day. Putting in lots of time into my business. Absolutely. I want to do that all day. Now, fitness, it's never been something for me that's ruled my life to where I'm okay training 20 hours a week. Like, I'm not a professional athlete. My fitness, my business doesn't depend on my fitness like other like influencers. They have to keep that 6-pack year round. That's what leads to a lot of like mental issues and all sorts of stuff. And anyway, all that to say is it takes a lot of time. I don't know if I'm really that interested in doing. Like, I've achieved, for me, things that I think are awesome. I've lifted some weights I didn't think possible. I've done some crazy things in workouts, all training 5 to 6 hours a week tops. So me doubling my training time over the last couple of months has been a crazy adjustment and not one that I plan to keep, in all honesty, when this is over. I don't want to commit this much time to endurance training. Not that I don't like the endurance training. I just like my family, my business, and everything else I'm doing more than I enjoy being on the road running for 3 hours. So I'm hoping that none of this came off too negative. I'm enjoying a lot of what I'm learning about running, and I'm going to stick with it. It's not like a grind for me to get out there and do these things. The runs are getting easier. What's really cool is seeing all the PRs. Strava really helps with this. I look at my Garmin data, but Strava, I'll just go on like this. I went on a 8-mile run the other day and I got like a 5K PR and a 2-mile PR because Strava just keeps all these things like records you didn't even know you were hitting, nothing Garmin would alert you about. So like, I'm getting faster and it's awesome to see all these things, but I'm getting faster in these longer distances I didn't even know I was getting faster in. I've always been looking at that mile and 400 because I've came up as a sprinter. But to see, oh, wow, that's the fastest 2-mile you've done. That's the fastest 5K you've done. These things are cool to see. And so there's a lot of encouraging things coming out of like my fitness, becoming fitter, building a bigger aerobic base. I'm learning a ton of stuff. So I am still having a good time with my training. But there's just some things I definitely don't like about endurance training that I'm hoping will change or shift over, the next couple months as I get out of this current training block and into a new one. So overall, I'm enjoying the training, but there's just some things about endurance training overall I don't like. Hopefully this is helpful. If you're looking to get into endurance training, some lessons learned on how to tackle the programming, what to do with fueling, how to work up to things, all that kind of stuff. And then even a consideration of, do you really want to run? Like, some people, like, they default to running. That's one thing I've noticed, because anyone can run, right? Like, you need a pair of shoes and then you go outside and boom, you're running. But that's not the only form of fitness. Like I said, I've been training seriously for 2 decades, and running significant mileage every single week has never really been a part of that. And I've been able to maintain great blood work, great athletic numbers. I've just been really happy with my fitness overall with very minimal running. So it's not even something that you have to do if you don't really want to. So don't think that you have to default to running because it's popular or other people are doing or it's easy. Easy to execute, easy to just, like I said, walk outside and run. It's not necessarily easy to do long term. But there are other options, and Garage Gym Athlete definitely is one of those options with all of our different training tracks. Even our enduro track is a different take on how endurance training is typically done. Our hard to kill track, shred, strength track. There are a lot of ways to do concurrent training, stay in really good shape, stay super athletic, agile, and just feeling good. There are lots of ways to do that without just having to be like, yep, I run and lift weights, because I think there are a lot of other ways to do concurrent training and really succeed. And so if you want to see what that looks like, go to garagegymathlete.com, sign up for a free trial. We'd love to have you. For all of our athletes who are in there doing the training, keep at it. I really enjoy you all being a part of the community. But that's it for this one. Remember, if you don't kill comfort, comfort will kill you.